We want to say welcome. We want to say welcome to everybody who's here this morning. I am Allison Venuto, and I am one of the board members of American Pilgrims on the Camino. We have a few other board members on our Zoom today that I wanted to say thank you to. We have Joe Curro. We have Steve Litch is here. We have Sarah, who is joining us all the way from her travels in Greece. We have Tom Coleman, and we have Bill Arts. And if I missed any other board members, I'm sorry. Could you let us know who you are now? No, I didn't miss anybody. Okay, great. I also see a ton of coordinator faces, those of you who are leading our local chapters. And so we are so grateful for all that you do for American Pilgrims and keeping that Camino spirit alive for those who are headed to the Camino or those who are coming back from the Camino, and helping prepare and kind of think through what that means to them and that journey home too. And so we're really grateful that y'all are here today. I really love that y'all are putting stuff in the chat. Thank you for that. If you do have questions during our session, please feel free to add those to the chat as well, and we'll try to get those into our session today. I did want to take a moment and turn it over to Steve, who is the chair of our board, and let him do a brief introduction.
Thanks, Allison, and thanks for pulling all this together. And I want to thank Andrew for sharing your Camino experiences with us today. I can't wait until, what is it, Tuesday that your book comes out? Allison had an advanced copy with her at the gathering, and I was eyeing it with great envy, looking forward to getting my own copy. So well, thanks for taking the time and giving us a little preview of what's in store. So Andrew McCarthy is actually the author of 3 books, Brat, an 80s story, Just Fly Away, and The Longest Way Home, which are all New York Times bestsellers. He's an award-winning travel writer, and he served for 12 years as editor-at-large at National Geographic Traveler magazine. Best known as an actor for the past 4 decades, Andrew's appeared in such iconic films as Pretty in Pink and Less Than Zero. He lives in New York. And Andrew, welcome.
Thanks, Steve. It's great to be with you guys. And thank you, Allison, for doing everything. It's so great to be with you guys. I have to say, as Steve alluded to, I have a new book coming out. So I've been out sort of hawking it the way one does. And all along the way, I've had to explain, what is the Camino? What's this walk? What have you been doing? Huh? Why would you do this? And so it's really nice to be with sort of like-minded people who understand without, I don't have to explain what the Camino is to. And so what I'd love to do today is get sort of a conversation going, because the Camino is life-changing for me, both times I've done it. And so I thought I might chat a bit for 10, 15 minutes about my own experience with the Camino, and then I'd love to sort of just get a conversation going if people are up for that. I can certainly ramble on, but so just a bit of my Camino history is in 1995, I stumbled into a bookstore here in New York and came upon a book called Off the Road by Jack Hitt, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with. And for some reason, I bought this book. I'd never heard of the Camino de Santiago. I knew nothing. I bought this book. And I was getting on a plane the next day, and I crossed to cross the country, and I read it on the plane. And by the time I landed in Los Angeles, I was going to Spain. And there was just something about his thing that I said, I need to do that. So seeing this was the early mid 90s, there was no internet really to find. I'd never heard of it. I didn't know anybody who'd done the Camino. So in the back of the book, it said Jack worked at Harper's Magazine. So I called up Harper's Magazine and I said, I'm looking for Jack Hitt. And they said, one moment. And this is when people used to work in offices, remember? And anyway, he got on the phone and said, yeah, Jack Hitt. And I said, Jack, hi, you don't know me, but I read your book. And he was like, you read my book? He was thrilled. And I know the feeling. Anyway, I said, you've inspired me. I want to go to Spain. How do I do it? And he was very patient with me. And I called him multiple times to the point where he's like, I'm working here. You got to stop calling me. So anyway, I went to Spain in the summer of 1995, and I walked the Camino Frances, and I started in Saint Jean, the way I guess many of us do. And I have to tell you, I hated it. I was miserable. I went alone, and I made the mistake of buying heavy leather hiking boots the day before I left. And so after 3 days, I had to rest in Pamplona for a week because my blisters were so bleeding and bad. And I found myself, I would have gone home, except that I'd bragged all my friends that I was going to go walk across Spain, so I couldn't do that. So ego and vanity kept me going. And every day kind of got worse in my experience of it. And the way the Camino does, I was starting to get illuminated to myself, and I wasn't liking it. And I didn't understand, really. All I knew that I was tired. And so a couple of weeks in, I was in the Meseta. And many of you will know then, all you have to do is mention Meseta to a bunch of us, and they go, oh, yeah. So I think I was right outside of Carrion, de los Condes, and I was walking through a field of wheat, as that's what there is there, right? And maybe some of you can answer this for me. My recollection was that there was now, and when I walked it last year, there was a road all the way through. There was a dirt road all the way through the Meseta. But my recollection, and of course, memory is a very fallible thing, was that there wasn't a road through it. And it was just a little rat's tail of a trail through much of the Meseta. And anyway, I was in a field of wheat, and I suddenly was on my knees and I was sobbing, and I didn't know why. And I chucked my stick, I flung off my backpack, and I had a full-blown temper tantrum, and I was sobbing. And eventually I stopped, and my limousine didn't come pick me up. So I had to trudge on to the next town, and 12 hours of dreamless sleep in some little albergue there. And the next day I woke up and I kept walking, and I felt like I had forgotten something, like I didn't have something. I felt like I was missing something. So I'm checking and double checking my backpack, and I'm walking, and a couple hours in, I stopped somewhere to have a little, cheese and bread have my break. And I suddenly became aware that I was seeing very clearly. Like the colors were just really sharp and clear, and I could hear bird song, like call and return, and I just felt very awake. And I was startled by this, and I just like, wow. And I slowly had a realization start to dawn on me, sort of rise up within me, but it felt like it was coming from across the horizon toward me, that what I didn't have that morning, what I'd forgotten, what I wasn't carrying, was something that I'd always carried. And it was fear. I suddenly realized in that instant that I was without fear for, it's not going to turn into an Oprah episode, don't worry. But I suddenly realized I was without fear for the first time in my life. It's so much so that I'd never been aware of fear's existence in my life until that moment of its first absence. And I felt like, my wife is Irish. She has all these great Irish sayings, and one of them is, I felt like myself from the toes up. And that's how I felt. Suddenly, I just felt, there I am. There I am. I'd felt like that way once before when I was 15. I was cut from the high school basketball team, and my mother suggested I try out for the play as the Ortfold. And I didn't want to be in the play. I wanted to be the point guard. Anyway, I tried out for the play. I was cast as the Artful Dodger and in Oliver. And since none of you were there, I can tell you that I was absolutely brilliant. And I was, because I walked out on stage and I felt like myself from the toes up in that same way. And I knew what I was going to do with my life in that instant. And I knew it was important because I told no one. It was my secret. And I kept it until I was ready to expose it to the world. And I felt that exact same way when I had that moment in the Camino, when I felt like myself from the toes up. I was just without fear in the middle of this field of wheat and just sitting there eating my bread and cheese. And that changed my life. I skipped across the rest of Spain. You know, the history that had been uninteresting to me was suddenly fascinating. I suddenly met interesting and wonderful and fascinating people that I had avoided up to that point. And my experience utterly changed and transformed, and it changed my place in the world. I then continued traveling. I began traveling the world after that. And eventually that led to a career in travel writing, an accidental career. And it can all be traced back to that moment in the field of wheat. And there was a before and there was after. And I'm sure many of you have had these kind of experiences. That's what the Camino does for us, right? And it stayed with me, of course. And I'd always wanted to go back and do walk the Camino again. And I didn't want to do it too quickly because like many of you, I'm sure, I found the gifts of the Camino rise up slowly, and many of them took years to come clear what I had learned. I often, when I was a young man and I was in the movies and I was very successful very quickly, very young, I felt I had what we now call, we didn't have a term for it then, but we now call it kind of imposter syndrome. I just felt like I didn't deserve what had happened to me, and I felt ill-equipped to deal with it. And walking across Spain that first time changed that. Because no one can take it away. I earned my way across Spain step by step. And when I arrived in Santiago that first time, I had done something I couldn't take it away from myself. It was a profound change in but the notion of that didn't come clear to me for years, really. And then I can point it back to that Camino. And I can point it back even more specifically in detail to, as we're walking, we always, often the first sight you'll see of the town you're going to is the church spire, because it's the highest thing, right? And every time I would see those church spires, I would always kind of go, God, that is so far still. And invariably, it was quicker and easier than I had imagined. And that metaphor really stayed with me, to just keep walking, and to earn my way across Spain on that first Camino, really, it made me solid in myself in a way I had never felt before. And it was a profound feeling. So I'd always wanted to do the Camino again. And fast forward to 26 years later, my son, it was late in the pandemic, and we'd all been bombarded with so much fear, right? And I said to myself, I need an antidote booster shot for fear. I need to go walk the Camino again. And so the minute it was sort of okay enough to go, I said, I'm going to go walk the Camino. And I invited my eldest son, who was 19 years old at the time. And I'd seen in him some of the things I saw in myself, in that inability to really sort of complete tasks and finish. And he just seemed to be drifting a bit. And he was about to embark on his own journey of life, and independence. And I said to him, you want to walk the Camino with me? And he's, because I had, of course, talked about it for decades, right? And all his life he'd heard about it. And one day he just surprised me, and he walked in and go, I'll do that walk with you if you want. And at that instant, I walked into the next room to my computer, and I bought 2 tickets to Spain. And 2 days later, we were in Spain, because knowing a 19-year-old, I knew he would change his mind in about 5 minutes. So I bought us 2 tickets, and 2 days later, we were in Spain. And I thought I would just give forgive me, I'm terribly technologically incompetent. So I thought I might just a little slideshow, as it were, while we're chatting, of that second Camino. So we went, that's my son Sam, and that's us at the base of Saint John there at the beginning of the walk. And the reason, I'll just roll through these as background too, and they're largely in order, but I'm sure some of you will notice that they're not quite. But it was what I was looking for also, when I was 17 years old, I left home, and my relationship with my father basically ended at that time. And I didn't want that with my kids. I didn't want my relationships to end, and so I thought it was an opportunity to rewrite our relationship in the sense of an adult to adult kind of thing. And I had no template for that with my own dad, right? And so I just thought the Camino was such a grounding and solidifying experience into who I am in my own skin that first time. I thought, I wonder if it might not help us establish a new baseline from which to go forth. And my son had also recently suffered his first romantic breakup, so he was in a vulnerable spot. And so off we went. And he, the big challenge, of course, was to keep him going until the penny dropped. On day 2, he said to me, Dad, what's the point of this effing walk? And he didn't say effing, and of course, when we arrived in Santiago on the last day, he said to me, Dad, that's the only 10 out of 10 thing I've ever done in my life. So it was it was a profound experience. And of course, there's the coffee, the cafe con leche that fueled us across the entire country. And I have to say, this was the best meal I had the entire Camino. It was in San Juan de Ortega, right before you go in that tiny village, right before you walk into Burgos. And it wasn't particularly a good omelet, but there was something about it that was, at that instant, it was just succulent, you know. And there are those little touchstones that we have in the Camino that I think we harken back to. It's like the eucalyptus trees. You know, ever since when you're near Santiago, you'll come upon all the eucalyptus. And whenever I smell a eucalyptus tree or even eucalyptus ointment or something, I'm instantly brought back to the Camino again. And so anyway, my son and I walked across Spain together. And I, being a travel writer, I kept notes with me to some degree. And I thought, I'm sure I'll write about this in some way at some point. And then we were about halfway in, and Sam said, I'm going to walk to Finisterre. Do you want to come with me? And I had no need to go to Finisterre. My body did not have a need to go to Finisterre. And I didn't the first time either. I said, Santiago was my goal, but go for it, you know? And the idea that my son was going to go, there we are in Leon, that my son was going to go beyond me. Somehow that low-hanging fruit of that metaphor was sort of too delicious to resist, because that's all we ever want, right? Is for our children to go beyond us, to be the first to go to college, to be the first doctor in the family. And that he was wanted to go to Finisterre and go beyond me was, I found that so moving, frankly. And so I thought, oh, I have a book there then. And so I decided to write a book about it with his blessing. You know, we just rolled past some photos of folks. I don't know, I'd be curious to know what you guys' experience was, because both times I walked, I walked the Camino Frances the second time as well. Both times I walked, I was very alone, and with Sam alone the second time for the first couple of weeks. And then slowly we started to incorporate people. So by the time we got to, I guess, before Leon, but we were fully engaged in a, you know, moving pod of misfits the way we do. And, you know, we'd meet them for dinner on Unspoken every evening. And just how it became from this sort of personal, quiet beginning to this communal experience by the end was deeply profound to me. And then, of course, at the end, there you are in Santiago, at the end, you know, there's the joy and the excitement and the thrill of arrival. And of course, the disappointment that, like, it's over. It's over. And, you know, I knew that that moment with my son was over now. You know, I had the great luxury that parents of adult children rarely have, which is time. You know, like my son, you sit him down to chat, you're not going to get very far, but you get him moving. Eventually, it all comes out. And but there's something, you know, as he walked to Finisterre, I sat in front of the cathedral for the last couple of days there, and often I would just sort of sit and I'd watch people arrive, and invariably there was the euphoria and the high fives and the pictures and everything, and then invariably people would just kind of stare off, and there's this sort of silent, private reckoning that happens, you know, and we all walk such a different Camino, and that I find utterly fascinating. And I'd be curious to hear people's thoughts on that, because, you know, I walk beside my son every step of the way, and yet we both had vastly different experiences. And so anyway, that's me kind of rambling on for a little while about my two Caminos. And I just thought, Allison, is there any questions that we wanted to address or thoughts anybody might have? I'd love to hear them.
So as you guys registered, we collected questions from you, and I kind of compiled them. We're not going to get to all of them, so I'm sorry about that. I think Andrew's hopefully answered some of them, but I did have a few that we wanted to talk through, Andrew, and then we will open it up to the group so that if y'all have questions right here as to what he said, we'll certainly try to get to as many of those as we can. So Andrew was very kind and gave me an advanced copy of the book, as Steve said, and so I was able to read it. And I want to say that, Andrew, your book is thick with details, and it's not necessarily, you know, everything that happened in a day, but it's these tiny moments that happened. And so I was wondering if you could speak to the writing process. How did you collect your thoughts on the Camino? Can you kind of talk us through that a little bit?
Sure. I mean, being a travel writer is I should just back up slightly into how I became a traveler, because it might inform that answer. Is, I was in Saigon alone traveling, and I was walking down the street, and this kid came up next to me on a little Vespa or a scooter, and he said, "Hop on, I'll give you a ride." And I'm like, "No, leave me alone." So, "No, hop on, I'll give you a ride." I'm like, "Leave me alone." And he wouldn't leave me alone. Anyway, I hopped on his scooter, and we spent the day together, and he showed me all around Saigon. And it was his Saigon. It was where his mother used to tend the public garden, where his father had been arrested, and all this kind of interesting stuff, personal stuff that he showed me. And he dropped me back at my hotel at the end of the night. I gave him $5 and he wanted 10. I gave him 10. Anyway, I went up to my room and I was jazzed. I was wound up from the day and I didn't know what to do. And so I grabbed a piece of paper and I wrote down what happened. And I'd never done that before. And it wasn't journaling, but I wrote, I'm an actor, so I've said so much bad dialogue. I know good dialogue when I hear it. So I wrote down things he said. And suddenly I wrote the events of the day out. And the second I finished that, I felt, oh, there I am. Just like when I was 15 years old and playing the Artful Dodger, just like I was in the field of wheat. And suddenly I said, there I am again. And I felt like myself from the toes up again. And so I started writing about travel. I did it for 10 years before I even wrote for a magazine or anything. And then one day I had an ambition to do that. And so I became a successful travel writer fairly quickly because I knew inherently that travel is valuable and changes lives. And it's not some frivolous thing that we do for bucket lists or whatever, but it has meaning and it's transportive. And I also knew inherently to tell a story, don't sell a destination. So travel writing is my sort of comfort zone in a certain way. So I knew that the book would have sort of several strands that needed to be woven together, which was the journey, the physical journey of the travel. And so to do that, you have to set a macro stage. You have to paint the picture of the entire, and then you have to zoom in for detail. And so they're constantly going back and forth between those two things. And then I knew there was the personal involved, the personal journey that we were on, and hopefully that would thread through toward the thing. And then there was the history of the Camino that was involved. And, it's sort of braiding those three together so that they're really just one story and they seamlessly sort of flow one into the other, hopefully. So as I was walking, I was I pulled them out. I have all these I had probably 9 or 10 of these little tiny notebooks that I would just, as we're walking, and the writing is so bad in it because I was always walking and I was scribbling, and I would always just write little details or observations of things that would trigger me, that would be touchstones for me, and never any big facts or anything like that. Or if Sam said something that was useful, I would just write them down, and so I just kept. And often memories would come, memories of my own father, which eventually became in the book. And I didn't know why they would come at certain moments, but I trust that they had value and meaning, and so I just wrote down memory of Dad and the hawk picture. And I know what that means. And so I said, I don't know why it goes there, but that's where it's going to go in the journey. And it was so, when you're writing something, a memoir of this kind or a travel book of this kind, you want it to be first and foremost truthful, because as a reader, you can feel the truth and you can feel someone holding back and you can feel some, otherwise soon it becomes uninteresting. If you're asking someone to invest their time, you want them really to just be sitting in bed alone and start nodding their head going, yep, I feel just like that. Yep, I know exactly what he's talking about. And then you've created that bond and that connection with the reader. And then, people feel less alone. And isn't that what it's all about? Is that feeling of connection? So I don't know if that answers that question at all.
Yeah. And one of the things that I wrote down as I was reading the book is you juxtapose the walk. And like you said, you were braiding those stories. And to me, you really had this ethereal writing. It gave us this kind of timelessness that I think some of us experience on the Camino, where time just kind of falls away. And so by you putting those stories together, I thought it was really interesting the way that you did that. So one of the questions that we got from the group here is, can you talk about the differences walking solo alone the first time and then walking with your son, and just kind of the pluses and minuses? And can you just kind of talk about how that went and kind of expand on that? People were really excited that you were talking about having teens on the Camino. So if you could kind of talk to that a little bit.
Sure. I mean, I tend to be an introvert and a bit of a loner. So going alone I didn't blink about that. It would have been much more sort of stressful to me to be going with someone the first time, although I was terrified. I mean, and I didn't even know I was terrified till the moment in the field of wheat. I was just, and so I was comfortable with myself and going. And although, as you know, the Camino, like we touched on, sort of reveals you to yourself in a way that you may or may not be ready for. And so, and it came upon me and walloped me, and thank God it did. But so the first walk was, and it's an interesting thing. We come back and people ask, and we show them pictures and we tell stories, but you can never capture what happened. It's such a private thing in a certain way. All you can do is go, you got to go. You just got to go. Anyway, so with my son, again, the Camino kicks up stuff. So it really kicked up to me the notion that how I am responsible and I am accountable to this person. I need to take care of this person. And then it was revealed to me, he's 19 years old. He can actually probably take care of himself, and how over responsible I feel so many times in life for my family. I have 3 kids, a wife, a dog, and how often I can feel the burden of that. And when in fact, it doesn't, yes, I'm responsible for them to a degree that one is appropriately responsible, but I discovered I had my own overburdening of myself with this and feeling the strain that I carried with me. And I suppose it was a reaction to my own growing up with my own family, where I didn't feel anybody had me or had my back, and so I wanted to make sure that everyone knew that I was there in a certain way, But to the degree that one overcompensates is the exact degree to which one is underly effective. You know what I mean? So when I was with Sam walking, if any of this is making sense, I learned to be appropriate the degree to which I am taking care of him and leading him. And of course, another metaphor from I introduced into this, so I'm sort of guiding him a little bit. And then as we go along the way, he asserts himself and begins to sort of be an equal partner in this. And then, of course, he's helping me up when I fall and going beyond me and going, come on, Dad, we're almost there, And it's a beautiful kind of the handoff of legacy was a beautiful thing. And as far as the practical of traveling with the team, it was fantastic. It was maddening because, of course, I wanted to get up and walk at dawn because I'm 60 years old, so I get up early, or I was 58 at the time, and he's 19, so he wants to sleep till the crack of noon. So our only battles really were about get out of bed, and we were walking in August. So Northern Spain in August is blistering hot, as you all know. So I didn't want to be walking at 2, 3, 4 in the afternoon. I wanted to be long in by then. So that was, but one of the fascinating things too about walking with my son was to really get to see him. We all think we know our kids or whatever. They look like us, they kind of behave like us. So we know, and, family legacy and lore sort of dictates. And I didn't know him to a very real degree. I would see him in bed, someone would do something, interact with him, and I would go, okay, he's going to react like this because that's how I would react. And he would react entirely differently. And I was just like, wow. I guess that sounds silly and obvious, but to really see my son, to begin to see who he is as a young man, and for him to get to see me, because he even said, and I think I put it in the book, it takes a long time to ever see your parents as real people, doesn't it? And I'd say that the same, the inverse is true. And to begin to get to actually see each other was, I keep coming back to the word profound, but that was very meaningful for both of us. And it did give us this new baseline of, I no longer sort of feel the need to give my son advice and things. The kids are like, they're running out the door and you're like, hey, you want to go get some sushi? Okay, see you later. Whereas, I had that luxury of just walk, and he's with you, So to see him and like, that was a big deal. And we'd have dinner with folks and people, and then everyone to a person said, God, my 19-year-old, I would never have walked this with my father. And that's my experience, that I never would have walked out with my father. And so I'm so grateful to my son that he did. But the trick was just keeping him going until like I say, the penny dropped, which is about a week in, where he kind of said, oh, we're in. Someone mentioned him Finisterre for the first time. And he said, you want to do it, Dad? And I knew in that instant, oh, he's in. And then now it's when I realized also my over-responsibleness. I go, I've been so worried and over-responsible for him. I didn't see that he's in, and so some of that sense of over responsibility sort of dissipated on the trip, and I was super grateful for that. Again, I don't know if that ramble answers any of the questions.
No, that's great. We have a question in the chat that's kind of related to what you were talking about. Did you meet others during your first Camino that formed your Camino family? Did you allow a Camino family to form on your second, or was your son all the family that you needed on that second Camino? How did that work for you, that Camino family?
Yeah, I think very similarly, actually, in both Caminos. Like I said, I was very alone the first half of my Camino. And then after that moment in the wheat field, I relaxed and allowed other people in and had a wonderful group of, 8, 9 people, the way one does. And one of which I'm still in touch with, 26 years later, a German lady, who's a dear friend. And the same with the second Camino, really. It was us, and we were walking, and I'm glad my son was, like I mentioned earlier, had just come out of a breakup, so he had a lot of talking to do. And, every morning we would start out walking and I would just be quiet because I knew he was going to start and I didn't want it. So I would just walk with him. And whether it took 5 minutes or an hour and a half, he'd go. So anyway, and off he'd go. And he would vomit this stuff out for hours. And I think he did a year's worth of processing in several weeks. And to be able to be there for that, and that he trusted me to that. And I didn't have to give advice and I didn't have to guide him. I just had to listen and go, that sounds tough. That was huge for both of us. But Sam being more social than me, more gregarious and more outgoing, he started meeting people and then incorporated people. So we had a bigger group of about a dozen of us that, and I loved it eventually. And that happened about halfway through, before Leon, about 2 weeks into it, we started to really be part of a group. And we often walked by ourselves. We would usually do all the walking by ourselves. And then we would meet up with the gang in the villages each night, in the town square and the Plaza Mayor and at the restaurant. We were like pigeons that would always gravitate. No one ever talked about it. Of course, you guys know, you didn't talk about it, you just met there. And then suddenly everyone meets at the hour and there you are having dinner, 12 of you again. And the waiter's screaming at you that you can't move all these tables together and, the usual. And so like that, yeah.
Great. I'm curious, what does Sam think of the book?
I'll let you know if he ever reads it. My son is not a reader. And so he did read the audiobook with me. He read, I gave it to him. I said, Sam, before I give this to the publisher, you might want to look at this. And he read like 15 pages. He goes, that's cool. Yeah, that's the trip. And I go, well, there's 250 pages. You might want to read the rest of them too. And but we did the audiobook together. And so that was just like the Camino. It was frustrating. It was wonderful. It was funny. And it was, there are moments when you just look at your kids, right? And you just kind of get tears in your eyes. And then they look at you, catch you, and you shut it down. Anyway, so we read the audiobook together. So he read all his dialogue and stuff, but he hasn't read it yet. So I'll let you know. He probably, I'm sure he won't read it. He'll listen to the audiobook if he does it all.
That's great. We have couple people in the chat who are talking about either walking with kids or having kids surprise them on the Camino. And so what you're saying is really resonating with people in the chat. So we had a question come in, and I do want to say, if you guys have questions and you want to put them in the chat, that's great. If not, if you want to raise your hand on the chat and I will let you in, or it's not in, but let you ask the question. We can do it that way too. One of the questions is, will you do another Camino with one of your other kids?
I'd love to. I love my daughter, who is 16, said, Dad, can we just go to Paris? So it's unlikely she'd want to do it. But if she did, I wouldn't in a heartbeat, of course. And my youngest is 9, who read the book. I actually just have a copy of the book. They just sent, you'd think publishers would send you the book, but they never do. And so I just got a copy. I was really excited about it. And he picked up the book when it came 2 days ago, and he's like this behind the book. And he read about a page, my 9-year-old, and he just kind of was reading, and he was silent. I just watched him to see what he would think. And he just closed the book and he said, it would have been better if it was about me. And so that was his read of the situation. So yeah, I'd love to. And I'd love to walk it again. And as Alice and I were talking earlier before we started, like, I'd go tomorrow, except I think about the Camino, I guess, almost every day, and have since I first walked it 8 years ago. And there are moments I'm like, it's like the Camino, or I'd like to be on the Camino. But the Camino, the gifts of the Camino rise up so slowly, some of them, that it takes years for them to really emerge in a real way. That I don't want to walk it too quickly, because the stuff that happened in this way, I think it processed a little quicker because I was actively writing about it. So I was actively kind of churning my process. But yeah, I'd love to again. And I'd walk it with, certainly I'd love to walk with one of my kids. My wife always threatens to walk it with me, but I don't really want to walk it with my wife because she's such a fast walker that even walking down the street in New York, it's like I'm 10 steps behind. And I'm like, this is so fun, sweetheart, to be out for a stroll with you. And so I'm not sure that we would do well on the road, but, or maybe I just meet her at the village at the end. I'll meet you there, go on. But yeah, I would walk it for sure, of course.
A question came in. Would you do a different Camino route this time?
Yeah, I'd love to do the Norte one, the one we were talking about. I'd love to do the North one, I think. But there's something about, I have to say, and the Camino, friends, as you guys, most of you know, I'm sure, is not always that pretty. You know, there's this large section of the walk that is not attractive. There's something about interesting. I love going into like a village of like 18, 19 people and walking your way into Burgos of 200,000 people in one day. You know, the idea of walking into a city, and the outskirts of cities, as we know, are not very pretty, but then walking out of a city again is so soothing to the nervous system, isn't it? There's something about that. And so I loved going back to the same route. And I did that consciously because I've remembered so much, or thought I did. When I went, I realized how little I actually remembered from that first trip. And that was really, it really illuminated to me how much memory is fallible and plays games with us. And we tell ourselves what we need to in certain ways or something. And yes, buildings, it got more popular, certainly, and the buildings went up and all that. And because of the success of the Camino, all these dying villages are now sort of coming back to life, which is fantastic. But there was something about that. I like so many places, like, I know I've been here, but this is not what I thought it was. You know, a few of them were exactly the same. O Sobrero, or however one pronounces it, was exactly as I recalled it being. Santo Domingo, you know, where the chickens are, it was exactly as I recalled it being. But so much of it was so different. And so, but I really wanted to walk the same route again. But I'd love to walk the north one. I think that would be kind of fantastic. And you know, it's so crowded now, the Frances. Although I walked it in, you know, 21, it was about half the walkers because of the pandemic, the sort of lingering, ongoing pandemic. That was about half the walkers that normally were. And I was grateful for that, I have to say.
That's great. We have another question in the chat. Have you done a silent retreat? The Camino felt similar to that experience to this pilgrim.
My silence is that reply. I mean, I've always been a bit of afraid to do a silent retreat because of my friends who do them always talk about how like oppressive it becomes. And we did know a guy on the trail who only would wave good morning and wave good night, and we'd see him every day. We kind of realized, oh, he's not talking. And then once we got to Santiago, he came over and started chatting because I'm sorry, I was on this thing, and he talked his story of how he was on this, you know, his own personal thing. And it was such a delight to sort of see him, and he had so much to say finally when he could talk again. So that was a delight. But I find I can get in my own self too deeply at times. So I wonder if, you know, sometimes it's harder for me to come out. They may not see me now because I'm chatting away, you know, but there's something about, anyway, I suppose it would be interesting to do because I'm afraid to do it. So I'm sure that's probably a good idea then.
Yeah. We had a question from somebody who walked with their 18-year-old daughter. Found that there was kind of a mind meld that happened and trip decisions became easier. There was very little discussion or deliberation. How did that work out with your son?
Well, I don't know that we have had a mind meld, but it was interesting to see that he would just wait for me to do everything at the beginning. Because I spoke, you know, bad Camino Spanish, but he spoke none. And for waiting for me to do everything till eventually I'm like, Sam, you know what? You know how to go say omelet, okay? So go order 2 omelets. To him, then just stepping into the fore and kind of going, I got this done. What do you want? You know, and that was lovely. To wait, you know, him moving through being taken care of the way kids assumptively think we're just going to take care of them. And me, going back again to what I was saying, overly burdened with the sense of responsibility, to letting that form of transition to a more appropriate and natural dynamic was another one of the gifts of it. But did we get form a Vulcan mind meld? I don't know.
We have another question about the process of writing. Did you write notes each night, or take, write parts of the book each night, or did you do it in retrospect? How did that whole coming together process?
Yeah, I had every intention of putting, so I would take these notes. I've got these 9 notebooks here, which I pulled out, and they're all filled with my, my chicken scratch. And, and anyway, so they're all filled with these little hand notes. And I had every intention in the evening then to organize them. And I brought a big pad as well to organize and clarify my thoughts. But I was always so tired at the end of the night. And it was such a pleasure to just go out with everybody else in the evening, come back, and suddenly I'm asleep, And so I did not. I came home to a mess. And the most important thing was trying to go through it and sort of decipher my writing, because I was always writing while I was walking and holding my stick under my arm and kind of going, So I didn't. My intention was to do that every evening, but I didn't. And I let it sit consciously for about 3 months before I touched it. I didn't want to come home and write too quickly. I just left it alone and came back to it for 3 months before I started writing, because I wanted to give it time to digest. Excuse me.
We have another question in the chat. Have you seen the movie The Way? And what did you think? And have any other friends, actors, anybody talk to you about maybe wanting to do their own Camino?
I did see The Way. My friend Emilio Estevez made that movie. It's a lovely movie with Martin Sheen. I think it's just going to actually have like a one-day re-release coming up very soon. So I recommend it to anybody who hasn't seen it. Yeah, I thought it was terrific. But like all Caminos, what we were touching on earlier, it was so vastly different than, like, yes, it's the Camino, but it's like, I don't recognize that, So I thought it was a lovely, it really touched me a lot. And Emilio's a lovely guy. And so, yeah, I thought that was, terrific. And what was the other question? And I have, many friends. I've been badgering people for years. You got to go walk the Camino. A friend of mine lost his job. It was a very powerful kind of job, and he lost it in midlife, in mid-50s. And I said, "Do you need to go walk the Camino?" And he said, "I don't need to go walking across the country. I need to get a job. I've got kids. I need to, He was so tied up in his self-worth was his job, of course, like so many of us. And so, but eventually he went and walked, and he's not stopped thanking me, 5, 6, 7 years later, and he came back to a great job. But so, of course, as we all know, that if you're at any kind of crossroads in life, there's no better thing to do than walk the Camino.
Agreed. Solved by walking, right? That's what we all say in the pilgrim community, right?
Yeah.
We had a question about how you, just kind of the logistics of your trip, because it was getting more and more crowded. How did you choose where to stay, or where, or, how to take your days and do your stages and things like that? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. I got these 2 books. You know them well. And they were both invaluable, and they both they were complimentary, the idea of, I got to carry 2 books, but I'm really glad I did all the way. They were both invaluable. And I think you guys have talked to John, right? I saw something on the website and I thought they were both they're really good. And the first time I walked, I was put in contact with the Confraternity of St. James in London. And they mailed me a tiny little, this isn't it, but it was exactly this size. It was a little paperback thing that had albergues and little things in it in restaurants. And it was all I had. And it was invaluable, so this time when I was going, I called the Confraternity again, because I didn't know you guys existed at that point. I'm so glad I've discovered you, and would like to join if you'll let me. But
we will let you do that.
I called the Confraternity again, and this guy said, because I actually don't even know if the border's open. But anyway, and he told me about a site called gronze.com. I think that's what it is. And that was invaluable as well. gronze.com. And it was all the little inns along the way. And so I would go, we stayed in albergues at times, but I'm also, I say in the book, I was a credit card pilgrim. I did not need to prove anything to myself to go stay in Melbourne and have people climbing over me to get to bunk beds and leaving at 3 in the morning and waking me up when I needed. So we stayed often, half the time in little pensions along the way. And I would just do about 2 days ahead. I'd book a little pension, or if there were any available, or we'd stay in an albergue. And so the logistics of it was just that. I had my 2 books, which I was consulting constantly, just because I found them fascinating. I think they're so well done. And I had that one website, and that was all we needed, and we never had an issue. But again,
That's
it was 2021 where there were about half the walkers that there usually are now. So, and we were in August, which is, prime time.
Did you book in advance? Like, did you know, 3 weeks out where you would be, or did you?
No,
guys
like I said, I would book, I booked myself about 2 days in advance. I kept this website, and I would just book about 2 days. Oh, never more out than that, because I kept petitioning for a rest day. And Sam was like, "No, we got to keep going because we don't want to lose the gang," And I'm like, "Okay." And he's 19. He wasn't tired, so I didn't want to book too far out, because the only one I did book or tried to about 2 weeks out was in Osa, because I had such wondrous memories of it the first time. And I knew it was tiny and there was nowhere to stay there. Although, when I was there, there was the albergue, the first time albergue, and one 4-room inn. And this time, there were several more now. And so I kept, and it was booked up and booked up and booked up. And I'm like, "Oh, I really want to stay there again. I really want to stay there again." And then the day we were going, I tried it again, and a room had opened up. So the Camino gods took care of me. But usually it was just a day or two out that I would book, or we just go stay in Melbourne.
That's great. Was there a particular moment or location that was meaningful to you, or that will stay with you forever?
I did something profound. I just thought the Osa was really touching to me both times. I don't have any. That's the one place I'm like, "Sam, where do you go to this? Where do you get to this place? Where do you get to?" And he did say, "Because Dad, it's like Eden up here," And so that's the one place that always just. As we were scrolling through those photos before, there was the church with the candles outside, which they were not outside when I first went. And I just it makes me, it takes my breath away every time. I'm just,
Beautiful. It's great to relive it too through the pictures. It's amazing. We have another question in the chat. I felt like my Camino opened up gifts or lessons that I learned about life that became a part of me. Did you also experience this, or Sam too?
Yeah, I think that's everything we've been talking about. I think it's changed my life profoundly. It brought me home to myself in a very real way, both times. And it brought me home to myself as a young-ish man the first time, and it brought me home to myself as a parent the second time. And when you bring your home to yourself, you're more relaxed, and there's more space, and you're not grinding and clutching, and that sense of desperation or need goes away. You just know, we're enough, we're fine. Yeah. And so, yeah, I don't even know how to answer that, except that was everything. That was it.
Yeah. We have another question. What was your favorite village, or a village that surprised you, maybe?
I loved San Juan de Ortega. I believe that's the tiny little place right before you go before Burgos that has 18 people in it, and has 2 little restaurants and one albergue in the church there. And this time I was, it's fantastic. And I think there are 8, depending on what book you look, 18 or 30 people live there. I couldn't see any of them, but I thought that place was just, there's something about that I could have stayed there a long time, and I don't know why. And as Sam went off to walk the way he always did when we'd arrive, I'd lay on a bed and put my feet up the wall for an hour and go, "Oh my God," and he would go off. And when we met up later, I was sitting on a picnic table, and I said, I was waiting for him to come up and go, "What a dump, there's nothing here. When do we get somewhere good again?" And he came up and he just went, "This place is cool." And there's something in that stillness that was just so how you just felt like I was being swaddled and held, and I could have stayed there a while.
Are there other places that you would recommend as a travel writer that maybe we should look at or try or something like that?
My screen just went funny. Is yours fine? Is it still fine?
Yes, I am going to try. It looks like someone is screen sharing, and I'm gonna.
Oh, okay. Great. I mean, I'm being a travel writer. My answer to that is always the next one. But I love. I kind of like my kids. If I'm not having a good time, I either need a nap or a snack. And so I'm game to go anywhere, because I just think the act of going is very enlivening again. And there's something in the sense of wonder that happens when we discover new places. And that wonder returns us to an innocence and an open-heartedness that we all too often squelch in our real lives, where we kind of set up our routine so that we're powerful and we're in control and all that kind of stuff. And I'm not sure that's so good for us, really. There's something wonderful about asking for help. And, out on the road, that happens a lot. That said, I love, remote places. I love Patagonia. I love the Sahara Desert, and that said, as Audrey Hepburn said, Paris is always a good idea. So, I mean, I'm game to go. And it's often hardest. It's like the Camino. It's just, my advice to anyone is just go. Don't think about it too much. Just go. You just get some walking shoes, not big, heavy boots. That's my only advice, and go. Get your ticket and go, because you can walk yourself into shape. You can walk whatever pace you want. You can do all that, as we all know. But so I'm anywhere is I'm interested in.
That's great. I do want to open it up in case anybody wants to ask a question. I know I've been reading them out of the chat, but is there anybody who wants to ask a question directly to Andrew? No, everybody's being shy. This is not usually a shy group, Andrew, but maybe we're feeling shy this morning. We haven't had enough cafe con leche this morning or something. Well, I will take another question. For future creative endeavors related to the Camino, I mean, do you have any other idea? I mean, you've written a book, obviously, but are there other things that you see coming creatively? Maybe a book, movie, TV show, anything like that in your brain?
No, I mean, you never know, but I mean, I don't think, I think the book about the Camino is sort of I'd always, I'm glad. So the answer is no. The simple answer is no, not that I can, although someone did approach me recently about the rights to make this a movie, but I'm like, well, look, we'll see. But I think the book's enough. Okay. And it's also very private and personal. I don't want to go, it's mine. I was surprised in a certain way that I wrote the book about it, because and you have to be careful when you write stuff, because once you write it down, that's what happened. You know what I mean? The truth is gone. What's documented on page is what happened. And then even in my own mind. So I had to find myself having to be very rigorous at times to just not fudge it and kind of thing. Go, wait a minute. What happened? And because I think that's a really interesting thing. I noticed that with my other books as well. I wrote a book about when I was a young, successful actor in the Brat Pack and all that. And I had to be really careful to be rigorous instead of just going to the story that I've told for 20 years and just go, what really happened that I know, that I remember happening? And because once it's on paper, that's it, even to ourselves, that becomes what happened. It's look at history books, that's what happened. And whether that really is what happened, we don't know.
And what next creative endeavors do you have? What's up for you? Are you doing any trips, or what's going on next for you?
I just came back from Botswana. I was writing an article for a magazine. I took my young 9-year-old son to Botswana, which was its own adventure. And so I did that, but I'm finishing up. I continue on to the Brat Pack motif. I made a documentary. I'm finishing up making this documentary about that, because being a member of the Brat Pack, which was for those who aren't familiar, and why should you be, in the mid-'80s, it was a bunch of young actors that were wildly successful when youth culture was taking over the movie industry. And I was a part of this thing that was labeled the Brat Pack. And, it's interesting because movies have never recovered from that. Movies are still about an adolescent mentality, but that, many of you may remember that wasn't always the case. Before the early mid-'80s, movies were adult entertainment until the movie studios realized, oh, wait, kids go to these movies 5, 6, 7 times. Adults go only once. Let's make movies for kids. And that's what we're still doing. So anyhow, I went back and I hadn't talked to any of my Brat Pack brethren for 30 odd years. And it was such a seismic event and altered the course of my life and the trajectory of my life and I thought I've never talked to any of the other people about it. You know, we were members of a club we didn't really ask to join in a certain way. So I went back to see all these people I hadn't seen and talked to them. And it was a wonderful experience to sort of make friends with your own youth and stuff and discover the affection that was there for not only each other in a way that it wasn't when we were younger, perhaps because we were so young and competitive and scared, but affection for my own youth in a way that I had dismissed. So that was nice. So I'm finishing up that documentary and I'm writing a television pilot for Sony Entertainment, although there's a writer's strike now, so I'm technically not writing that right now.
Yes. Well, I just want to say on behalf of American Pilgrims and all of the love you are getting in the chat right now, we are so grateful for your time. We're grateful that you've shared your story about the Camino and that you spent your afternoon with us. With that, I want to say thank you to all of you who also came and asked questions and participated. We love our Pilgrim community, so we're so grateful for you. We will continue to have national events, so check your email. We'll have additional ones coming up. But check your email for what's going on, chapter activities and the website and all of those kinds of things. I do want to turn it over to Steve, our chair, for our closing. Any final thoughts, Steve?
Yes, Andrew, I put the link to the membership page in the chat. So if you join within the next 48 hours, I'm going to be in New York later this week. And if you join in 48 hours, I'll treat you to a cup of cafe con leche and deliver your pin personally.
Excellent. I'm going to do it now.
Great. You know, I really appreciate not only have you helped us relive our own Camino memories, but you've also helped us get some insight into how to shape those, how to claim those, how to share those with others. So it's been a real creator's workshop for us as well, and we're grateful for that. I think that's one spectacular way that you've given back to the Camino. And here's my plug, joining American Pilgrims is a way for all of us to give back to the Camino. And for those of you who aren't members, your donations, your membership fees go help to support the infrastructure. My guess, Andrew, is that little rat's tail trail that you saw across the Meseta was developed into a real trail by one of the Camino associations that we support through our grants. We have 59 chapters around the country. In fact, it's the New York chapter that Andrew reached out to, and we got in touch. And so we're grateful to them for setting this up. And then information with wonderful links. And I'm sure our webmaster, Sarah's on, and I'm sure we'll have a link to your book on our resources page too. So thanks to everyone who joins and is volunteers. You can become a hospitalero to help these poor footsore pilgrims like Andrew along the way. Just one way to give back. So wish everyone a buen camino, and we'll see you in New York.
Great.
Buen
Thanks so much.
Camino. Thank you, everybody.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. That was awesome.
Thank you. That was wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you guys for coming. We really appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, great speaker. Thank you.
It was
Yes.
it was a gift. Thank you.
That's sweet of you. Thank you. All right. Thank you.